Hello everyone, I'm Teresa Miller and welcome to Writing Out Loud. I'm visiting with Carolyn Wheat, who's writer-in-residence at the University of Central Oklahoma. Her latest book is Mean Streak, a mystery novel, and you write a series of mystery novels. Carolyn, you're a New Yorker, you went to San Diego, you came to Oklahoma. So many of us in Oklahoma dream of going to New York or California and becoming a writer. What brought you to Oklahoma?
Well, I need to back up a little bit and say what brought me to New York. Because
Okay.
I grew up in Toledo, Ohio.
Oh, okay, so you're global.
Well, I grew up really wanting to be a writer, to be a lawyer, and to live in New York. And fortunately, I have managed to have all of those dreams come true. And then I was there thinking, well, is this all there is? You know?
Yeah.
I mean, I always say that I loved living in New York for 20 years. I was in love with New York. But I stayed 23 years. So the last 3 had me beginning to think, boy, this is dirty, boy, this is big, boy, this is expensive. It's just a big hassle to live here. But I didn't know where else I wanted to go. So I planned my exit from the legal world and got a contract, wrote a book, and then decided to just go see the world. So I packed everything into a U-Haul truck. And I left Brooklyn, I crossed the Brooklyn Bridge into Manhattan, went up the West Side Highway, crossed the George Washington, and then I was in America. You know, having left New York City, I was now in America. Drove to my sister's in Cleveland, put my furniture in storage, and bought a car. I didn't own a car. In New York, you don't own a car. It costs too much. So I bought a car and just headed out in faith. You know,
that's
across
scary.
the country. It was scary.
Until I'm a cynic.
Yeah, well, it was wonderful though, because I went and saw some friends, and you know, went from Wisconsin to St. Louis and then across Kansas. I didn't go through Oklahoma when I did this the first time, but Kansas it's big.
Yeah. Oh, it is.
Kansas goes on.
This is quite an exodus. I mean,
Yeah,
this
it was
is
wonderful. And I stopped for 3 days in Abilene, took out the word processor and the printer, and wrote up a proposal for something. You can get a lot done in 3 days in Abilene in a motel. I will tell you. You know,
Is that sort of a writer's mecca?
it is, apparently. I mean, there's nothing to do there. So you just sit there and work, and the motel is cheap, and it's got a hot tub right on the highway.
Well, let's go. We'll have to get a retreat going.
All I need is a hot tub, and I'm happy in a motel. I could live in motels. I truly could.
I may end up having to do that sometime.
So I end up, well, the other part of this, though, the writer's dream does end with running out of money and going home to mother in San Diego. That's the problem.
And then winding up in Oklahoma. And you know, there are all
Yes.
kinds of stereotypes about New York floating around in Oklahoma. And I'm sure you probably had some preconceived notions about Oklahoma before you came to teach at UCO. How was Oklahoma different from what you expected?
Well, I'm not sure that it really was. I knew that there would be more open spaces than I was used to. But I also, I mean, I know what century we're living in. I know people are not really, you know, riding their horses into town and hitching them up at the hitching post anymore. That there will be malls and even cappuccino, you know.
So you realized you were
Only one Japanese restaurant. I mean, there are some things, yes.
Oh, well, we have several Japanese restaurants in Tahlequah, so you just haven't been to the right
I just
places.
haven't been to the right places, but there is one in Oklahoma City, and I treasure it. You know.
I wonder, in my writing, I have little set patterns where I like to write in a certain place and all of this. Was it hard for you to be in a totally different kind of environment from the ones that you had been in previously, to move from city life to a slower
Not
life
really, no.
pattern?
I'm a kitchen table writer, and there's always a kitchen table.
So it didn't make any difference to you in that
Not
way?
really. I bought a little laptop before I left. That's the other thing. You get a little tiny computer. You can go anywhere.
So you're into the modern technology.
I am,
Are you
actually.
on the internet at all?
I have just gotten into the internet through the university. In order to do it myself, I would have to buy a bigger and better machine, which I will do someday. But it's just totally amazing. You don't know what's out there if you haven't done this. And in the world of mystery, it should be said, that's a lot of authors have their own web pages. A lot of the organizations have web pages. There are mystery discussion groups. It's a really great way to network with other people around the world and talk about mysteries and say what's happening. And I'm certainly going to get a web page and have all my books on it. And you know, it's the wave of the present.
The wave of the
wave
present.
of the present.
Well, I
And
think you're probably right on that. And part of the present for you involves your teaching. And I wonder, is it hard to combine the teaching with your writing, to find time to evaluate other people's work and then progress with your own?
Yes and no. I mean, yes, there are times, particularly near the grade, period where I'm going to be inundated with a lot of student work and I don't really have time for my own. And then there are the long breaks, which is a big help to get back to my own work.
Mm-hmm.
And I do find that the teaching wakes me up sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
And occasionally I'll find myself talking about something and a little penny will drop and I'll think, listen to your own lecture. This is great stuff. Go home and do this. It's easy to, you talk about it and then you can still be blocked in your own work on something that should be obvious but isn't. Mm-hmm. And then you find yourself dealing with a student and talking about something and you say, oh yeah, okay, I forgot that part. And you go back and fix your own. I mean, I find that teaching writing makes me very conscious of the choices I'm making, mm-hmm. why I'm doing something. You know, my own process becomes something I really look at under the microscope a little bit more, which is, I think, an interesting thing for a writer.
So even though you're on your 4th book, you're still learning?
Actually, I think I'm on the 6th at the moment.
6th book, okay, so you're still learning.
Oh, sure, oh, sure. Well, listen, a famous lawyer who became a judge, but had said some really nasty things about judges in Life magazine, mm-hmm. said that after about the first 100 trials, you really kind of learn what you're doing. Mm-hmm. And I think the same is true for writing, that, you know, what seems like a lot of writing is really, I mean, every time you look at it, there's kind of a new threshold of beginning. Mm-hmm. Yes, you've had a lot of experience behind you, but now there's a whole new level to explore. And if that stops happening, I'm going to be burned out. I mean, that's how I think people burn out, if they stop learning something new with each book or each experience, each writing experience.
And I know you write a lot to help you with, I read a lot to help you with your writing, and even teach a course on mystery novels as literature, yes. Is that right?
Yes, yes.
Do you think that's an advantage to you as a writer? Do you learn from reading other writers?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. I don't see how anybody, in fact, I had a student who shall be nameless.
Oh, heck.
I do a questionnaire at the beginning just to see who they are. Where mm-hmm. are you in mm-hmm. your work, and mm-hmm. what do you like to read, and you know, who do you want to be when you know, mm-hmm. if you had your book cover and they said in the tradition of blank, who would that be? Mm-hmm. And I had one student actually write down, well, I don't read that many novels. To which you're sort of, you know, I mean, you sort of want to say, well, the pottery class is down the hall. If you don't read novels, why do you want to write them?
Mm-hmm. How would you answer that question yourself?
Zinger.
Yeah.
Let's see. Well, when it comes to writers I admire, one might want to break it up into living and dead.
Dead's safer.
Dead's safer.
For those of us who are living.
And so from that point of view, yes, I'd like to be, I consider myself a little more hard-boiled than the most. I just reread The Maltese Falcon. Uh-huh. So I really admire what Dashiell Hammett did in the form. I always liked Raymond Chandler, but I didn't find it quite as exciting as I'd remembered. Interesting. You know, sometimes you read the classics and they're not quite what you thought. Backing up a little bit, when I first started my book, there were not all that many really strong female mm-hmm. detectives mm-hmm. on the scene. Mm-hmm. I was in the process of writing when Sarah Paretsky and Sue Grafton came out mm-hmm. with their first mm-hmm. books. So of course I was thrilled to have them, but mm-hmm. they didn't influence me in quite mm-hmm. the same way. People who did were Dorothy Salisbury Davis and P.D. James, An mm-hmm. Unusual Job for a Woman. Mm-hmm. You know, these were women who suddenly were writing about women who were not flighty spinsters, mm-hmm. not wives mm-hmm. who were only there to be mm-hmm. the wife, like mm-hmm. Mr. and Mrs. North, but mm-hmm. these were women who had their own lives, their own careers, their own perspectives on things, and that's a new tradition I'm very proud to be a small part of.
What sort of things, when you read other novelists, do you look for, and what sort of things are you working on and developing and trying to get better at it in your own work?
Wow, that's a good question. I like to see characters that are allowed to be themselves and not be judged. I do think that this is a tendency in some of the hard-boiled detective novels, whether mm-hmm. it's by men or women, but I sort of think men do this more, mm-hmm. where they will present a mm-hmm. character, and yet we don't see the character plain, we see the character filtered through the sensibility of the private detective. Mm-hmm. So that the private detective is constantly judging and evaluating everybody that mm-hmm. he or she runs into, and then the reader is not given the chance to do that. Mm-hmm. I like the writer to kind of get out of the way mm-hmm. and show me a lot of people doing things and let me, the reader, judge. Mm-hmm. and to play a little bit with the moral ambiguities of life. So that it isn't, I mean, everybody being all black or all white, it's fine till you're about 14, and after that, an adult story has got to take you into the grayer areas. You know, is there ever a point at which you might cover up knowledge of a murder? Is there ever a point at which you might know some truth that you don't reveal? I mean, playing with the battle between good and evil is limited. The battle between good and good is fascinating.
I like the way you said that. You know, it used to be a standard question in creative writing classes, do you like your characters? But it sounds to me like you don't even think in terms, do I like this character or not like this character?
Right. I mean, sometimes, I mean, Cass is pretty judgmental. I'm not saying she doesn't make judgments, but I don't want her judgments to automatically be the same ones the reader makes. I want the reader to be standing apart from her and occasionally saying to her, you know, you're missing something here. You know, this person has more than you understand, or this person is lying to you. She does get lied to, and she occasionally believes people she shouldn't and doesn't believe people she should.
So in addition to the literal mystery you're dealing with the human mystery and the human dilemma of making these tough decisions about.
I think so, and I like to deal with certain legal issues, like Fresh Kills dealt with the adoption situation, that bring up a lot of feelings on. It's not just a dry legal subject. You're dealing with real babies, real childless couples, real people, and what happens to them is very emotionally, it impacts them greatly emotionally, and there is no simple right, wrong, open and shut legal answer. So I want to explore the possible ways the law can deal with this.
You left the legal profession,
Yes.
Carolyn, to become a writer. Why did you leave?
Well, I couldn't do both. There are people that can. John Mortimer comes to mind, the creator of the immortal Rumpole. I love Rumpole. But he could do both. I can't. It seems to me that having the responsibility as a lawyer is just too much to also try to be, for me. So I had to leave, and I did it. I mean, I had this, you know, cosmic sort of thing where I started law school in June, of all things, of 1968. June, right after my graduation, 5 days after graduation, I started law school. And that's 3 years. I ended my legal career teaching 3 years at Brooklyn Law School and left there in June of exactly 25 years later. So it's like this big 25-year circle of law, and now it's time to do the circle of writing.
But the circle of writing takes in the circle
sure.
of law.
I don't know what I'd write about if I hadn't been a lawyer.
It saves you a lot of research time, doesn't it? Do you read books, legal thrillers and novels that are about lawyers and by people who aren't lawyers, and say to yourself, no, this isn't right, this isn't the way it is?
Oh, worse. There are lawyers who are playing quite fast and loose with the law, and I don't know how they can do. I mean, that's a problem. Sometimes I look at those and I say, gee, why aren't I on the bestseller list with 3 names and something, a big legal thriller? And I don't mean to criticize all of them, but often there are some really gaping problems in those books. People are constantly defending their closest relatives on charges of murdering some other close relative.
Well, see, we do that all the time in Cherokee County. You mean that's not acceptable?
Well, this may be true. I don't know. I haven't followed as much law here as I might have liked to in terms of what's going on locally.
How important is a book to be legally correct if it's a novel dealing with the legal system or involving the legal system? Is it pretty important that
it's important to me as a reader. That's all I can do is talk about my own reading. If I find something that's really too much to handle, it just throws me out of the story. I don't believe anything anymore. And if I don't believe it, I can't finish the book.
Now that you're writing about a character who's an attorney, have you looked at the legal profession a little differently?
I probably should have, but I'm not sure I have. I don't think I have really given that much thought. I know that we swore not to mention OJ, but I must defend the defense bar. Those lawyers did their job. And so a lot of the criticism that Johnny Cochran and the defense team has received has made me appreciate more the role of the defense attorney and how hard it is, and how the defense attorney is often automatically condemned just for representing those people, regardless of the merits of the case or the outcome. And so if anything, I'm a little more entrenched in my old beliefs about the law.
Well, you know, so many books have been written about that trial. Have you ever thought about doing any nonfiction books about actual court cases?
No, I don't want to be tied down to actual reality. That would be boring. But I have not read any of the O.J. books, but every so often I see somebody on TV and I think, well, maybe I'll read that one.
Well, on a practical level, you know, we've all had to negotiate literary contracts. Does the fact that you're a lawyer put you in a little bit better position than some of the rest of us?
No, it might even be a drawback in a strange way, because I know that certain clauses are really unfavorable to me, and I also know there's nothing I can do about it. This is the world in which we live.
Well, Carolyn, we're going to take a brief break and come back and talk about Mean Streak and some of your other projects.
Okay.
Carolyn Wheat. We'll be back with more with Carolyn Wheat in Mean Streak.
This is an RSU-TV Encore presentation of Writing Out Loud.
Right there.
Well, there it is on the net. Hello, everyone. I'm Teresa Miller, and I'm visiting with Carolyn Wheat, who's the author of Mean Streak. No reflection on her personal character. She is also a writer in residence at the University of Central Oklahoma. Welcome, Carolyn. Thanks for sticking around and visiting with us. We were talking about your writing career, and you've written 6 novels featuring Cass Jamison. When you started your first novel, Dead Man's Thoughts, did it occur to you that this was going to be an ongoing series? Did you start it with that idea in mind?
Yes, it's very standard in the mystery world to do that, and I love series because there's a sense of, as a reader, there's a sense of going home again and visiting a certain world. Mm-hmm. You know, that you're not just reading a book, but you're going back with old friends and catching up with their lives. And so I wanted to create that kind of a world for my readers.
When you were thinking in terms of creating that kind of world, did this first story come to you, or did the character of Cass come first?
Well, the first story, as a matter of fact, was based upon a real murder of someone I was close to. A different relationship than the one that's actually explored in the book. But so the two things kind of came together. I was dealing with my own feelings about this real murder and beginning to think about writing a mystery series. And being a defense lawyer, I thought I would write about, it would be easier to write about something I knew. And so, yeah, the two things really came together, and so that the actual, shall I say, plot was based on more reality than I wanted it to be, but there it is.
Well, and that's, did it help you to write about it in fiction?
It did. It was a very strange experience because I wrote things down in kind of a diary form of how I was feeling, not necessarily thinking this will be in the book, but then passages did. This is one of those murder mysteries where the person who was killed is actually someone we like. Which is not always, so I wanted to really show some serious mourning. You know, you don't just lose somebody and then suddenly say, oh, I'm going to solve the crime, and sublimate all your feelings into that. At least most women wouldn't. So we have mourning and tears and sorrow and closure on solving the murder.
So it's almost a psychological story as well as
it ended up that way, and I think that was a good way to start. And then, of course, you can't just kill off everybody she ever knew, you know, so we actually move into other people's troubles in the other books rather than a really personal case.
As we sit here talking about Cass Jamison and we talk about your feelings, it seems that there's a lot of similarity between you and Cass. Is that right? Is it fair for us to make that judgment?
Well, yes, I see her as a very close cousin, not exactly a sister, but you know, someone who's very much like me but different. I mean, there are aspects of our lives that are very different. She's more of a lawyer than I am, but then she doesn't.
Because she's still practicing.
Yeah, she's still practicing. I mean, I see her. I know where she lives in Brooklyn. I see the building. So
does she have to deal with a lot of those gray areas we were talking about earlier?
Oh yes, I think so. I think that's part of life in the world to begin with, and it's certainly life in the legal world. But I think all of us do when you stop and think about it. I mean, here, all right, this is on my mind for some reason. I think I saw a Law and Order the other night. Well, we're wearing clothes, right? Who made these clothes? Were they made in a sweatshop someplace? Were they made in Indonesia by 12-year-olds? We have no idea. And yet, when we go shopping and spend our money for anything that we own or wear, if we were really conscious, if we really made ourselves conscious of the impact of every single penny we spent, first of all, we'd go crazy, but second, we are all living in some level of gray area without really becoming conscious of it. In terms of, yes, if you really knew, you would not buy clothes that were made under those conditions.
But we don't want to know.
But we don't really know, and we don't want to know. That's the point. I think at Cass and in the mysteries, we create people who have to know. And sometimes they have to know more than they really wanted to know about those gray areas and have to make decisions that the rest of us can kind of close our eyes to. The difference between a gray market computer and a gray market baby may be quite large emotionally, but morally, how different are they?
What about Cass, for example, in some of these gray areas? Does she sometimes have to defend people she knows are guilty?
Well, the term knows is open to a great deal of interpretation there. She certainly defends people that she suspects are guilty and that she may have a very, very strong belief that they're guilty. But you really do shy away from knowing they're guilty. I mean, nobody was with the person when the crime was committed. I mean, lawyers are not in a position to say, I absolutely know. And we treasure those moments of doubt. But a couple of things happen. One, first of all, we all develop a philosophy of the job that allows us to, consider ourselves a part of the system and a necessary part regardless of our own beliefs about guilt or innocence. And the other thing that happens, and I'm convinced that this happened at least to some degree during the OJ trial, I saw it happen with a colleague of mine at Legal Aid, you stop focusing on the forest and you start looking at each and every tree in your trial while you're on trial, and you're looking at this piece of evidence and that piece of evidence, and you as the defense attorney are focusing on every possible moment of doubt. And you actually convince yourself for the duration of the trial that your client might be innocent. You at least look and say, well, wait a minute, there's a little bit over here. Was that identification really good? There was 10 minutes between the robbery and the capture. Maybe somebody else really did it. You build up all of the moments of doubt to where you yourself, because I don't think you win a case without conveying to the jury a strong belief that your client is innocent. But contrary to popular opinion about defense attorneys, I don't think they're that good at lying. The way they do that is by believing it themselves for the duration. As soon as the conviction is in, they go out and have a drink with their friends and say, I always knew he was guilty. But at the moment they're selling it to the jury, they're selling it to themselves too.
So your experience in the courtroom and in dealing with clients informs your character?
Oh, yes. Oh, yes, yes.
And you mentioned a moment ago about the ways that characters, women characters in mystery novels have changed. How is Cass different from some of the other women mystery sleuths that are out there?
Well, she's a lawyer. That really is a major difference, because many of them are private eyes who have a very different relationship to the system. There are things that Cass cannot and will not do because she is technically what is called an officer of the court. In other words, even as a defense attorney, if there are certain things going on that are illegal, she has an obligation to say something about them to someone, whereas a police officer has a different relationship to the system, and a private investigator is not totally outside the system, but more so. So I think that restricts her role. She's also less physical, which may change in the next book. But
okay, but well, you mentioned the next book. The book that's out right now is Mean Streak, and we mentioned that at the start of this segment. Tell us a little bit about what's going on in Mean Streak.
Well, the Mean Streak is a roller coaster.
Oh,
it's in Cedar Point, Ohio, and the old wooden roller coaster that I remember as a kid and that Cass remembers was called the Blue Streak. And it was a lot of fun, and it was like the big deal when you were a kid to go ride the Blue Streak. Well, then they built the bigger one, the big fancy one that they called the Mean Streak, because it was bigger than the Blue Streak. So in this book, that's a metaphor for Cass's crossing over the Brooklyn Bridge and handling a case in federal court in Lower Manhattan, which is a kind of a spotlight courtroom. It's the place where people get tried and they're on the 6 o'clock news. And so it's a bigger and different kind of trial for her, and it's a media trial because she's defending her former lover, who's a mafia lawyer on charges of bribery. So the question is, can she ride the mean streak? Can she hit the big time and handle herself, or is she really not good enough?
Oh, it sounds terrific. And not only are you busy writing novels, but you're also writing short stories. So you're on a busy streak as well as dealing with mean streaks and all this sort of thing. And is it hard to shift from writing a novel to a short story?
Oh no, the short story is a wonderful break. For one thing, you actually see light at the end of the tunnel when you write a short story. Novels are big. They take up your life. Whereas a short story, you can actually conceive of finishing it within a reasonable period of time, and this is a thrill. And the other thing is, for me, a short story gives me a chance to really take a trip away from Cass, from Brooklyn, from law. I can go into the past, I can go into the mind of a male police officer, I can just be somebody completely different, and that's very refreshing. So I find short stories really recharge the batteries.
And we've got to mention the vest you're wearing. We just have a minute here, but Route 66 all over it, and a collection of short stories connected with this vest.
We're in the process of marketing a collection of mystery short stories by people who live along the route from Chicago to LA, and of course the Oklahomans were the first ones to sign on and say, we're in.
Oh, I bet so.
So there will be stories from each, and since the road was opened in 1926, there's not only a geographical mix, but I hope to have a good mix of periods of people writing about the 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s along Route 66. I think it should be a wonderful collection, and
well, it sounds like it.
Some good people in it.
Carolyn, congratulations on Mean Streak. Thank you for coming to Oklahoma, and thank you for visiting us on Writing Out Loud.
Thank you.
Thank all of you for joining us on Writing Out Loud, too.